views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. In November, the early part of this month, voters elected a new city council that will begin serving formally at the beginning of 2018. Many incumbents, of course, were re-elected to 4-year terms. In the coming weeks, we're going to try to bring many of the Bronx Council members to BronxTalk so that we can keep them on their toes and also so we can help you stay in touch as much as possible with the people who are representing you and our Bronx communities in city government. It's something we've taken seriously for more than 2 decades. And so, to talk housing and development and quality of life in their districts and a host of other city council issues, please join me in welcoming what I like to call the Andes. It's Council Member Andy King from the 12th Council District in the Northeast Bronx. Nice to have you, sir. And from the 11th Council District in the Northwest and North Central Bronx, Council Member Andrew Cohen. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks.
Well, I'm going to start off by congratulating both of you on re-election. I know that in many cases in these elections, the totals are overwhelming, but I know for each of you it's some satisfaction that you get re-elected, reappointed by your constituents, so I want to congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
I'm in no particular order. Councilmember King, let's start with the same question for both of you. What do you think, what are your hopes are for the next city council? What are the things that are on the table that you say, this year we're going to get to?
Well, I would like to just see a council that's going to be cohesive in all aspects. Our legislative process flows and goes, and that we're all on the same page. And, you know, in any governmental structure, whether it's at the federal level or state level, we're at the city level, if there is a debate on an issue and how do we resolve it with the 51 members, that whatever those debates lead us to, that we all always come out as a unified front to deliver for the residents of New York City. So I'm looking forward to whoever the next speaker is to be a speaker who is going to be able to bring that leadership to us. And I always say jokingly, making sure that we got to have the grown-up leading the sentence at the table so we can always have that smart conversation that's inclusive of all the members, because we all get elected to go down to City Hall, and we all should be able to bring back, as you say, bring home the bacon for our communities as well.
I want to be very clear then. Are you implying that maybe that was not the case in the past, or how do you see what you saw and what maybe you learned from and could do for the future?
I think I'm looking forward to us. We got a lot accomplished in this session. We definitely got a whole lot accomplished, and I'm looking for us to get more accomplished on that similar road. And if we have to chisel out new roads or new paths, you know, to continue to grow, then I look forward to being a part of that.
I know you have some legislation that we're going to talk about, but are there general topics or things that you'd like to see addressed?
I would like to make sure that our children have access to employment throughout the city. I'd like to make sure that our schools are thriving and get the resources that they need and take out some of the bureaucracies that might be in there. I want to make sure that there is proper housing. And if we have to help our brothers and sisters who may be struggling, that we offer the proper services before we build housing or place New Yorkers in houses that they may not be able to maintain while they're trying to assimilate back into society as a functioning New Yorker. So I'm excited about being able to work on those agendas with my colleague to figure out how do we take care of every New Yorker, whether they're doing well or they're just doing okay or they need some assistance.
Unfair, you got to hear what the questions are before the show. So, same question for you. What are your hopes for the next
In all
city
fairness,
council?
I think Andy nailed it, but I will say that I think that while I have done very well under the leadership of Melissa Mark Viverito, I think that we're both really looking forward to the opportunity to picking a new speaker for the Bronx, playing a prominent role in picking a new speaker, and really being part of the leadership of the council and making sure that the Bronx gets its fair share in resources, in leadership, and has an opportunity to really lead the city.
Then let's talk about the state of the speaker's race. The one Bronx council member whose name is out there is Council Member Richie Torres. Is that, and your statement that, gee whiz, I hope the Bronx does well, does that imply that you would favor him as Speaker?
Well, you know, it's a tough balance because in likelihood the county that gets the speakership will not get the chair of land use and finance and the prominent committees. So it's trying to strike that right balance. I think that Richie would be a very good speaker, but there are a lot of very good candidates out there.
Do you have a favorite horse in the race at this point? I know that neither are going to answer that question, but I'm going to ask it nonetheless.
I will answer the question.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
partial to Mark Levine. I think that he's got the right demeanor, the right temperament to be the speaker. I think it's important that the members are treated fairly, that they have the opportunity to participate in a meaningful way. And I just have a lot of confidence in Mark. But again, there are 8 candidates, and I really can't say anything bad about any of the 8. I think that they'd all be good.
Same question again for you then. A favorite in the race, or thoughts about Bronx Council Member Richie Torres being out there?
My favorite is the person who is smart, articulate, who's a unifier, and who is going to help us all deliver in our districts. Can all of them do that? I think they all can. If a Bronx has the speakership, does the Bronx prosper? I think so. But, you know, I say it jokingly, and sometimes it boggles the mind sometimes that in the federal and the state, but in the city, we're the only governmental body that the fans get to elect the captain of our team. So it's a little, it's a little strange, but it's a system that is set up. So at the end of the day, the negotiations play out, and we try to be the best team members to make sure that whoever's the speaker, that all of us are able to be in leadership roles to deliver for our Bronx.
And you don't have it seems clear at this moment, you're not willing to say somebody who you see as a favorite or somebody that you favor at this time.
I like the Bronx.
Well, it's unanimous around this table. All right, fair enough. Let's talk about some issues then that are, I think, important to viewers and certainly your constituents. We'll start with you, Council Member. Let's talk about small businesses. You have your, I guess, a radio show that you do regularly, and I think it's a great way, and certainly I'd be a fan of media in the Bronx, and more media, to me, is always good. But in there, you talked with the leader of the Merchants Association. Talk to me about White Plains Road. How healthy is it? What does it need? And what can, for example, a Merchants Association do to help unify and make those businesses more prosperous?
Well, in the past 3 years, I've been funding the Moshulu Merchants Association, East 233rd Merchants Association, in the goal of bringing businesses, small businesses, to be more productive with the neighborhoods. We want to be able to, have businesses respond to us as well as we patronize them. So as opposed to taking our money outside of the districts, we're saying, hey, shop on White Plains Road from 233rd all the way down to Gun Hill, in an effort to change the environment, because the environment for so many years had been dark, desolate. There had been some crime, there's been some drug sales on it, but we've been able to clean it up. We've been able, with the Department of Transportation, finally put daylights up and down White Plains Road, which brightens up the corridor, because that was my #1 concern when I got in, that the drug dealers were selling stuff in the dark spots. If you want to make a community feel good, then you got to make it conducive of not providing crime, but giving it another feeling. So we've done that. A number of our new NYC cleanup, which I've put over $100,000 in there for new transfer skeps, more pickups on White Plains Road. The truck that comes in sweet, and they even on the 12th, myself and my staff and community residents, we get out and we sweep the corridors ourselves. So we put a lot of money and energy, as well as with the Department of Homeland Services, to clean up any undomiciled individuals that might have been out there, to give White Plains Road a new look.
So sanitation, security, lighting, these are all code words for any business person in the Bronx will say, well, in order for me to do well, I need to have those things. Then how are the businesses doing? There are some empty storefronts on White Plains Road. What has to happen now to fill those up and help those businesses do better?
Well, the first thing I would say is that we have gotten better. And while we're looking for 100% occupancy, it's going to take a minute, because we were bad at one time at about 55%. We're right at about 82% of occupancy on White Plains Road now. And now we're looking at getting some different major stores to come in, as well as giving a variety. Because at one point we had saturated with too many of the same stores, so and it wasn't doing good for us. It gave it a whole different look. So
little organization couldn't hurt. In your district in particular, and actually, again, similar questions are going to come Council Member Cohen's way. You have Bay Plaza, obviously. If I remember correctly, you were outspoken against the idea of a Baychester Mall. I'm guessing partially because of the fierce competition that creates for the small businesses. So I guess a two-part question. Are you concerned about the competition, let's say at Bay Plaza, which I know you support, and we did a promotion together out there, as a matter of fact. And then second of all, what happens to that space over there at the Baychester Mall that now it's on, I guess back to square one?
Well, quickly, mom and pop shops, love them. They are the backbone of making people feel like it's a neighborhood. The mall at Bay Plaza does what it's supposed to do. It services not only the North Bronx, but it services the entire Bronx. They are far distance away from one another, so the traffic doesn't bump heads. One thing I would say about why we had to kill the MTA project, because it would have been direct competition of a mall that we had the only indoor mall in the borough of the Bronx that we will still get to get stronger with vacancies.
So it wasn't the competition with small businesses; it was the competition with the mall that was there.
The competition that because I didn't want to put that mall. We used to get that together. So that space, and we offered a number of ideas to the developer, and they still only wanted to put a retail mall there. And I said, with the only indoor mall in the borough of the Bronx, I didn't need another mall right across the street. We needed something that was conducive and complementary to the community, which it was built, because as Cohen's district, our both of it, it's a homeowners district, so there was only homes around it. You can't build Woodbury Commons right next to people's backyards and their side yards.
Right. So for you, let's talk about Broadway. Give me
I'll just pipe in. I actually represent the north end of White Plains Road.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, I do, and I think either now or going up eminently or is holiday lighting. Like, we both had a commitment to trying to support the merchants there. I will say organizing the merchants is really God's work. It is very hard. Mm-hmm. I think because the business owners are busy trying to make a living.
They don't have a lot of extra cash to spend on amenities.
Or time. It's to serve on a bid board or to serve in a merchant's, it takes time. And they're busy trying to make a living as opposed to spending time. So that's always a challenge, but I think we've both found ways to support the merchants on White Plains Road.
You have a Healthy Development Corporation, the KRVC, which is in the Broadway
I do. I
area.
have the Jerome Gunhill bid, the Broadway bid. So I do have a
there
number
are
of
some
support
organizations. But let's talk about Broadway. There were a couple of malls built, one on 238th Street, actually kind of two on 238th because it wraps around, and then one, of course, at 230th Street. And then when those were launched, a lot of businesses were relocated. There was a long-time hardware store that's gone. Talk to me about the health of the Broadway Strip right now.
Well, the construction of those malls precipitated a huge jump in rent. I mean, I think there was some speculation going on Broadway as well as all this development. But ultimately, the investment of these dollars, I think, is a sign that people think that the corridor is vibrant and worth investing in. And so that I feel very good about. Is the mix exactly right at the moment? I don't know. The mall on 230th, they've had some turnover there, but they've always found new tenants. The 238th, I think, is doing very well. I have some empty stores which I feel sort of bad about. I insisted that in the self-storage that they put retail to try to keep the retail corridor.
I was going to ask you about that. What is? I mean, there is literally a strip of what looked like they could be good locations, but there's nothing in there, and it's been that way for a while. I think there's a Japanese restaurant on the way.
Yes, and a FedEx outlet, retail
is already
outlet.
there.
Yes. Yeah. I think that one of the challenges going on in sort of commercial rent in general is landlords want big tenants where they can amortize the rent as an investment, which is a challenge to mom and pops because their rent is not, you can't turn that into a security that Wall Street can trade on. So that's been a real challenge. I think that landlord on Broadway is looking for national tenants whose rent, like I said, can be turned into a security.
Do you think that's mistargeted? Do you think he or she, whoever it is, ought to take another look?
Apparently, that is so lucrative that keeping the stores vacant for a while is in their interest.
Even if it's not helpful to the community.
It's definitely not helpful. Yeah. And one of the struggles I mean, you know, I know you patronize on Johnson Avenue, and I have a very, I think, unethical commercial landlord there who does not really, you know, care about the corridor. It really has a negative impact on the community.
In that area, right across the street, was one of the Bronx's most controversial projects, the 5731 Broadway. I really thought the Riverdale Press story about the fact that after they moved in, after a lot of, for people who don't know, this was supposed to be market rate, and then it was turned into a shelter and a facility, you know, for the city, for homeless people. But local people then came out and brought them turkeys and holiday food. I thought that was as good a sign of Bronxites sticking together as I've seen. I frankly congratulated the Riverdale Press for that story. What's your vision of that spot right now? Was that a bad mistake? Was that a big problem? And what's your vision for the future?
Well, I think that the heart of the controversy was not the shelter per se. It was that someone came in there, a developer came in there and said they were building market rate housing. And the community board even
the
gave
Stag
them—
group, like it's no secret who it was.
The community board gave them certain variances to work on Saturdays and do things that they might not have done had they honestly represented the project. And so I think that that really put it on a negative footing to start with. I do think that so far it has been relatively, you know, well integrated without events so far. I am concerned, and I think that you would probably be concerned, that the Riverdale Press was kept out of the first community advisory board meeting, which is of some concern to me, but hopefully that issue will get worked out.
But you see this, you don't see it, I mean, people of course talked about property values going down and the neighborhood going to hell. You don't see it like that. Certainly I loved, again, the way that the local people said, well, they're just our neighbors, let's be nice to them. What the heck?
I understand people, you know, who may not understand as much as, you know, we've had to learn about the homeless crisis. But the truth is, getting a family shelter on a commercial street next to a precinct is as about a good a deal as from DHS as you're going to get. So I think that that project will ultimately be well integrated into the community. Praxis is a good provider. And
you know, frankly, wouldn't that be a nice thing to do that and allay people's fears, have everybody work hard to make sure that people who, what the councilman said earlier, people who need housing or need support get it and become integrated as Bronxites, I mean, as people in our neighborhoods. Let's talk about some individual legislation and things that you guys have on your plates. I know for you, Council Member King, it is the idea of raising the age for applicants for FDNY. Why don't you explain what that is and why?
Well, we've had a number of cases of young men of color who were athletic, strong, and capable of doing the work. But because they aged out, because they applied at age of 25, and then by the time they got called, they were 30, they no longer could become a firefighter. So
you can't enter, it's an educational thing for people to understand. So you can't enter the fire department, the FDNY, after you cannot take the test after the age of 29. So that means then you can't get called to after 34. My bill says that you will raise it to 31, so someone can take the test all the way up to 31, and then as late as 36 become called to become a firefighter. What happens there now, they qualify for a pension if they get called at 36. They're still qualified, they'll be able to run the full gamut of a career as a firefighter. But also what it does, it still allows people who are in shape, because our lifespan is a whole lot different than 30 years ago. This bill is archaic when they tell you that you have to be 29 years of age. And then when you go to the ethnic part of the scenario, the O'Malleys, the O'Reillys, their kids are training to be a firefighter by the time they're 18. In communities of color, you may not realize that being a firefighter is a good deal until you're in your mid-20s. Then you age out when you try to apply. So you can't get in?
Yeah, you can't get in. So guys today, at the end of the day, if you're not in shape, no one's going to take you anyway. You could be 22 or you could be 42. No one's going to take you anyway.
Could you do one of these to the guy on your right and ask him if he supports it? Are you behind? You like this idea?
I am not a sponsor of the legislation. The one concern I have—
Council Member King is.
Yeah, he's the main sponsor, and then I could be a co-sponsor. I'm not. The one concern I have is that firefighters often do not serve the 20 years. They often go out on disability. So bringing older people in, I
Gives
think
a greater chance for that.
that's my one concern. I think that though that Councilmember King is keenly onto an issue that the fire department is not nearly as diverse as it needs to be in this city, and trying to solve. I mean, we're working together to try to solve that problem one way or the other.
I'm going to ask Councilmember King this because I know he is squarely behind it, and I want to tap into your legal background about it as well and see what your thoughts are on this idea of discovery for justice. Now, I was not aware of it, and that's my complete innocence about understanding some of the criminal proceedings, but prosecutors are not required under current law to submit police reports, testimony, witness reports to a defendant prior to the trial. That seemed, when I found out about it from your staff, incredibly unfair to me.
Yes.
How can any defendant properly prepare for their defense if they don't have the information? I guess that's I guess I've articulated the issue. I guess I'm on the team.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and you can't. And that's I call the bigotry within this oxymoron of criminal justice. Because I don't know, you can talk about criminal and justice. You give justice for the criminal, or we get justice for the civilian. So
I think it's justice for everybody, of course.
But at the end of the day, your system is flawed. You know, New York is one of the few states that don't have open and early discovery. And that's what, about 3 years ago, I submitted a resolution into the council calling to repeal Criminal Procedure Law 240 and 240 and apply it with 245, which would call for open early discovery on behalf of everyone who's involved. And I'll stop with this because I want his legal mind to jump in on this. I think we do the world a disservice when you have prosecutors and defense attorneys not trying to get to the truth. This whole system is designed to protect the system. If we know that Mr. Cohen is guilty or he's drinking a glass of water, and I walk in and say, I see him drinking a glass of water, but the law says I was supposed to knock on the door first to see him drinking that water. Since I didn't knock on the door first, it's inadmissible. So it's not even about trying to find the truths in a lot of our justice, you know, and people stay in jail based on not having the right information or not getting information. That's why it's so flawed and it's unjust, especially to people who are poor, who cannot figure out how to pay bail. So they have to negotiate a deal whether I'm going to say, I'm going to stay in jail, I'm going to negotiate a deal and go to jail, or I'll wait to get sent to jail not even knowing what evidence is happening.
What was been charged.
Yeah.
Council member?
Well, he's interested in my opinion because he knows I agree with him.
He would be interested anyway, I'm sure, in the interest of fairness.
This is a national trend. I mean, New York is going to get there, but right now, the status quo is really, it's offensive. You could negotiate a plea deal without knowing all the evidence that the prosecutor has against you.
And how old is this? Has been part, again, forgive my innocence, I guess I've never been on trial, so I guess.
This is historically how it's been done. There is an exception for Brady material, which is exculpatory material, that if a prosecutor is in possession of evidence that would support your alibi or demonstrate that you're innocent, that they're supposed to turn that over. But generally speaking, there's a lot of evidence the prosecutor has. And there are some reasons, but I think that those reasons are solvable. Prosecutors will cite, protecting witnesses. We're not going to tell you who the witness is against you because we don't want you to intimidate the witness or we don't want you to interfere with the witness. So there are some reasons where it might be appropriate and probably precautions can be taken to avoid that. But generally speaking, I think that having full and open discovery makes a lot of sense.
I want to ask you about a kind of a whole area, and that is North Broadway going up toward Yonkers. There's been a lot of talk about traffic in that area. There were all kinds of plans to remodel that part of it. Now I understand that the Traffic and Transportation Committee at Community Board 8 was talking about remodeling Marshallou Avenue going up to Riverdale Avenue. I know I've thrown a lot out there, and these are very technical issues, but do you have general thoughts about what ought to be done, if anything, in those areas?
I have been concerned since I was a candidate, 4 years ago.
The first time.
Yeah, 5 years ago, about the condition of North Broadway. I think that I don't want to pick on my neighbors to the north in Yonkers, but it's not a particularly beautiful area, South Yonkers, north of Broadway. And I'm concerned about that kind of creeping south into North Riverdale. One of the first things I did was, which shockingly, no shovel has gone on the ground yet, but I funded the creation of a new playground at Moshulu Avenue in Broadway in front of the stables to try to make an investment there to make it a little better. I think traffic calming, there is a DOT plan that I believe they're going to implement in the spring.
Mm-hmm. And you think those things will work better than the talk about single lanes? And there was all kinds of very serious talk about changing the width of it, putting bike lanes in, and all those kinds.
They
of
are
things.
going to. The DOT is planning to put in a protected bike lane on Broadway from 242nd to the Yonkers line, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Would that make it difficult, for example, for people who use the world-renowned cross-country track to park buses and things like that in that spot?
I hope so, because I don't really want the buses parked on Broadway. There is parking provided for the buses, and that's been an ongoing issue, trying to get the buses off Broadway. I mean, to go along Broadway and look out at the parade grounds and have that view blocked by the buses is problematic, and we've made a real push with Parks Department to make sure we want the track people to come, but they have to obey the rules.
Any thoughts on the prospects for one lane? I think it was on Moshulu Avenue, or do anything with that, or am I catching you?
I think we're combining a couple of different things. There was a proposal by the North Riverdale merchants to turn Riverdale Avenue into one lane.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't support that at this point. They had a lot of good ideas about ways to beautify Riverdale Avenue and Moshulu Avenue, but I don't think that bringing Riverdale Avenue down to one lane in each direction would be helpful.
We are just about out of time, so I'll give you one final thing. Just talk about if you could dream a piece of legislation that you could bring up right now, or at least after the first of the year, to the City Council and see it go through. What would you like to see?
Well, I was recently appointed to a capital reform task force, which is with the mayor's office and the council. It has been my biggest frustration in office is that I funded a number of capital projects, particularly with the Parks Department, and I literally have not seen the shovel go in the ground on a parks project that I funded. So trying to reform the capital process is going to be high on my agenda.
And same question for you to wrap up the show, sir.
I have a bill, a resolution, and I like to see happen to get our kids in a better state of mind when they walk into a school building that requires uniformity, the way our young people address themselves when they walk into a school building, so they focus on the fractions, not what they're wearing. I think if we can do that, we can narrow down and eliminate a lot of the other psychological challenges that our students go through when they walk into a building.
It is truly a joy to have had the Andys on our program. I don't know if we're going to make a habit of it. We came up with the idea. Council Member Andy Cohen, again, congratulations on re-election and good luck in the coming session. And of course, Council Member Andy King, congratulations to you and good luck. And
Yes.
That's how we do it in the BX, right? If you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, email them to us, BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You can send a tweet at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of the program. You can check out the archives at BronxNet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk by following the Watch menu on the new BronxNet website. And I will tell you, we are working at getting other council members in the next couple of weeks, so we'll see how they pair up as we move forward. Thanks to our producer, who is Lindsay Violet. Our director is William Guzman. To the cast of thousands here and to you, we'll see you next week. Good night. Happy holidays. Very nice to
Excellent.
get us out.